Welcome to the Chrisman Commentary, daily mortgage news podcast. I'm your host, Rob Chrisman. Topics on today's episode include what to look forward to from the Fed's meeting in Jackson Hole this week, my interview with FirstClose's Ramiro Castro on how lenders can more effectively assist borrowers, reduce closing times, and shorten closing times, and what housing starts and building permits, as well as builder confidence, says about the overall direction of new home sales. Thanks to today's podcast sponsor, FirstClose. FirstClose provides fintech solutions to HELOC and mortgage lenders nationwide, increases profitability, and reduces costs for mortgage lenders through systems and relationships that enable lenders to assist borrowers more effectively and ultimately shorten closing times. To learn more, visit firstclose.com. Markets are closely watching the Federal Reserve this week, with attention centered on tomorrow's release of the Federal Open Market Committee minutes from July and Chair Jerome Powell's Friday speech from Jackson Hole, both of which should hint at the likelihood of a September rate cut. While Powell is unlikely to explicitly commit to a policy move, any lack of pushback could reinforce current market expectations, with rate cut odds holding around 83% for a 25 basis point reduction next month. Recent commentary from Fed officials signals openness to adjusting rates amid real tariff impacts and a shifting inflation landscape. With mixed economic data and August CPI still pending, the Fed is expected to preserve flexibility while laying the groundwork for a quarter-point cut next month. We learned yesterday that U.S. homebuilder confidence fell in August to its lowest level since 2022 as rising mortgage rates and persistent affordability challenges continued to strain the housing market. The NAHB/Wells Fargo Index showed a record 66% of buyers reported offering sales incentives, and over a third are cutting prices to attract buyers. Meanwhile, foreign investment in U.S. real estate rose for the first time in 8 years, driven by cash buyers less affected by domestic borrowing costs or location constraints. Although foreign purchases still represent just 2.5% of the market, their growing presence could add to affordability woes amongst American homebuyers. For today's interview, I wanted to welcome to the show FirstClose's Ramiro Castro to talk about how lenders can more effectively assist borrowers, reduce closing costs, and shorten closing times. He's Chief Product Officer at FirstClose, where he's responsible for defining and executing the company's product vision and strategy, as well as leading the product development and implementation efforts. He joined FirstClose in late 2017 as a senior engineer and was promoted to Director of Product Development in early 2022. And prior to FirstClose, he'd been in the industry about 2 decades, holding several leadership positions with Atlassian.
Kind of set the stage here. Can you give listeners a refresher on what y'all do there and kind of how the company fits into the home equity landscape, which has been blowing up this past year or two? And so it seems like you're obviously well positioned for that. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. Give people a little more background.
Absolutely. So just to give you an idea, starting around 2000, early 2000s, a lot of FirstClose focus was building a unified platform to bring the various provider integrations together from flood through valuation and title. And then as we get a little deeper into 2005 to 2010, we started focusing on the closing and recording piece for a full settlement services suite. We also did some additional LOS integrations there. But from a value standpoint, our primary focus was full offer of settlement services, but we also brought in the instant property report. So it's a technology report that goes out that's mostly technology driven in the sense of pulling out public record data and building a title report. But then legal investing is always pulled and reviewed by a person, right? So it offered a way faster turnaround time than title, usually within 4 hours, sometimes almost instant, depending on the data availability. And then we rolled that into traditional property reports and rolled that into Smart Select. But which basically at that point looks at the lowest cost and highest performing vendors and can select the right property report vendor within your footprint. You look at that's a good settlement service suite, unified platform. We started getting into bulk ordering, which allows you to pre-configure a bulk set of ordering on different loan scenarios. And then coming into 2020, we got into the POS side, right? So what we really looked at in the MeridianLink functionality specifically was the native app didn't have an intuitive flow. It was definitely not borrower friendly. So we started with something as simple as data collection, estimating the CLCV, looking at as low as rates, having the borrower select the program, and then submit that for an instant approval to the MeridianLink integration engine. From there, we actually built a second version of that, plugged into the product and pricing engine in MeridianLink with the factors of estimated CLTV and the FICO score and your additional program parameters. You could actually pre-qualify and off personalized offers based off the PPE coming back from the LOS. So from a borrower experience standpoint, I'm going from, hey, I want to understand what my options are, to making a commitment. And those are aligned with PPE based off a soft credit pull score and the estimated CLTV. Once they move to the pre-approval, we ask for a little more data collection, right? So now they're going through the full inquiry process, and then we hit that decision engine one more time. And then at that point, disclosures are automatically generated for HELOC, for home equity loans, because we don't have the fees. It's semi-automated. The lender does have to plug in the fees, but after that, they're able to generate the disclosures for closing in seconds as well. And what that does is it takes you from a few minutes from the shopping to loan commitment to disclosure execution and basically your intent to proceed. So it really expedites the conversation for the loan officer roles that are there to provide that guiding and shopping experience and ultimately the commitment. What's interesting is in our research, what we found is typically the borrowers, especially from IMBs, a little more modern approach, banks, a little more so, credit unions tend to go through the whole loan approval process before they even get to some of those steps that I just mentioned, right? So from that standpoint, they go to the next step, they can clear their conditions, and that basically takes them through either the initial stipulations or conditions that pop up during the loan, because we're synchronized to the task engine in MeridianLink. And from there, they can actually schedule a closing, right? That's talking mostly front office from the borrower experience, starting from the shopping experience all the way down to loan approval and closing. But also on the back office services, which was our original point of entry into the market, and those settlement services, you can actually trigger automated ordering and one-click ordering. That depends on your level of automation and comfortability. But the main purpose there is through ITP and intent to proceed, or whatever your procedure is, the kickoff point. You could look at CLTV, lien, FICO score, and lien position, and actually structure your ordering behavior on the fly and trigger that either automatically or a one-click review. And so that really speeds up the time as well from flood title valuation, right, and ordering that after that initial intent to proceed and that pre-approval. The other thing we've seen too is that within 0.5% of from what they were quoted at that first pre-qualification stage versus what the loan ended up funding at, that's been within 0.5% of the quote. So pretty amazing results in terms of what they're quoted. The one piece I did leave out that I just want to make sure, DTI obviously is also a factor. You'd be surprised some credit unions and banks don't check DTI depending on the credit score and those types of things. So a little flexible there, but between pre-qualified to pre-approval, we actually collected stated income too. So you get a snapshot right there at that disclosure generation. And we've only seen about 10 to 15% redisclose, and that can be just a change of circumstance. But even with the change of circumstance probability and the fact that we're disclosing on a pre-approval, that's pretty amazing stats. So we've been able to improve not just the borrower experience, but the lending experience. And that's when we say we're an end-to-end solution in terms of home equity, what we talk about is augmenting the loan origination system. And so we spent a lot of time deeply integrating to the LOS and understanding the things it can and can't do, and then filling in the gaps, but providing a unified experience for both the borrower, the loan officer, and the loan processor.
Yeah, and it's neat to see in general, the HELOC space seems like it's driving primary originations forward in the sense of time to close, and maybe there's ways to rethink the process and it can all be more efficient. I want your take, or FirstClose's take on helping lenders modernize what's traditionally been a pretty manual lending process, all the way from intake to closing.
And that's a great point, because traditionally, home equity is kind of the afterthought in the real estate transactions, right? First mortgage and refi get a lot of the tools and a lot of the market focus. So you're right, it is a lot of manual steps. So bringing the pre-qualification and pre-approval method from mortgage into home equity and adjusting the flow according to what's relevant to equity has been big, right? And one of the primary factors in equity or a refi transaction can be obviously the equity in the property. So estimating the CLTV by with an AVM that's underwritable and also pulling the remaining mortgage balance from the public record data gives you a good shot at the total available equity. And then through that, you can actually synthesize that either by FICO score and property type and property use. But either way, you get the lowest estimated CLTV of your program threshold. And we look at that and take that and submit that to the PP to return personalized offers. So that type of math would typically be done manually. And sometimes we've found borrowers filling out an intake form to wait for somebody to call them, get some additional information, wait for somebody to call them back, right? And what we found through our borrower research is they're really looking for a pressure-free experience for them to do some research, which that estimated equity and pre-qualified step gets you to. And then they make a commitment there and want to go through the entire inquiry process. So taking that process modernizes the borrower experience, but it also streamlines the conversation with those folks in that loan officer sales role, right? Because now I'm picking up the call, I've got a pretty good snapshot of where this borrower is at. And I can pick up the conversation from there. And at this point, the borrower's been educated, understands what they could offer, what they could potentially get into. I already understand the line or loan amount, depending on if it's closed-in seconds or HELOC. And I've got a pretty good idea of where to take the conversation from there. And I'm pretty much already ready to start underwriting that because I've got a snapshot of all the main components of the decision factors in that loan.
Maybe you could talk about differences between what y'all are working on and maybe what the rest of the industry is doing in the sense of why do you feel like what you're doing is unique and innovative?
Yeah, I think one of the things, if you look across the point of sale market specifically, the first thing you'll see is everybody loves to tout configurability, but ultimately configurability doesn't always equal throughput. Most of the time, it turns into a lot of admin overhead, a lot of change control anytime you need to shift to market conditions. So our focus is more on streamlining the workflow, but making it personalized and configurable in the right spot, right? So is one of the common things that I have discussions with lenders on is that they get really lost in, the look and feel or potentially some compliance language. But ultimately, if your goal is to streamline the borrower experience in your operations, we really need to focus on the workflow and that pre-qualified, pre-approval workflow and all the automation that we bring into it is a big factor. But the other aspect is you hear a lot of talk about AI and it's the new buzzword. We're really about augmenting your workforce, right? So unlocking that power and doing less with more. So our strategy isn't to replace people, it's to empower and actually extrapolate the efficiencies between the borrower and the lending team so you can do more with less, right? So again, our focus is the right touch points. If you get a borrower that's completely wanting to do self-serve, okay, great. If they're not wanting to do self-serve and at some point they want to jump off to somebody, the idea is that they can call somebody, walk into a branch, and the lender can pick up right where that borrower left off. The other thing too is by having that digital conversation up front, it speeds up and doing more with less to that point is it speeds up the call time, right? Your call time, your in branch time, the borrower is coming in there with intent, already understands what the options are, and just wrapping up a few questions, right? So I think it's really about meeting the borrower where they're at and understanding what the lending team needs in terms of operational efficiencies. Downstream from that, what makes us really unique is not just from the point of sale value functionality, we also touch on the third-party services and the automation of ordering. So that processors and going in, jumping in, clicking through different provider integrations to kick that off. All that's streamlined and taken care of and can be triggered off complete automation or one click.
A big advancement with all the technological capabilities or capacity at our fingertips is leveraging data to make real-time decisions, to automate smarter lending decisions. How are y'all doing that specifically?
So from that extent, we shift everything forward, right? Credits validated at intake, estimated CLTV is calculated instantly, pre-qualification flows through your PPE. From there, we collect state DTI information and return that into an instant approval or refer for a review, right? Then comes the disclosure automation. We put all that directly into the LOS for accurate and compliant disclosure packages. No bottlenecks waiting on the disclosure desk or chasing incomplete data. As the loan structure is saved, borrower-specific conditions are also automatically generated and presented, pushing them more towards loan approval and ultimately fulfilling those conditions. Coupling that with the third-party services that come back, you've got a pretty sweet package in terms of automating and augmenting your workforce through the path from application start to loan approval. So most lenders operate in stages, right? They collect the app, wait for docs, manually validate, build the file as they go. It's slow, expensive, and it's risky. You can lose a lot of business that way. So we're really taking a very streamlined approach and using the LOS as a system of record, but orchestrating the borrower experience as well as the third-party service experience to give the lending team a unified experience in terms of starting that application through loan approval and then ultimately closing.
And finally, before I let you go today, lenders out there that are looking to reduce cost or move faster, how can they learn more about what y'all have on offer at First Close?
Well, FirstClose.com, and coming out to speaking to all our sales prospects. We'll also be at Acuma and the MBAs this year, so you'll see us there and have a presence there. But yeah, you can learn more just through our website, contact our sales reps. If you're an existing customer, account managers as well, obviously. And so, yeah, go ahead and feel free to reach out there.
Awesome. Good stuff. And I'll be at Acuma too. So hopefully we can link up there. I'll meet up with the First Close team. Very much appreciate the time today, Ramiro, and hope to have you back on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Rob.
Today's economic calendar includes housing starts and building permits for July, Redbook same-store sales, Treasury activity that will be headlined by a buyback in 1 month to 2-year coupons for up to $4 billion, and remarks from Fed Vice Chair for Supervision Bowman. We begin the day with agency MBS prices roughly unchanged from Monday, the 2-year yielding 3.76, and the 10-year yielding 4.33 after closing yesterday at 4.34%. Let's wrap up with a joke and some housekeeping. Jeb Jr. goes over to Billy Ray's farm one day to pick up some moonshine, and he hears some strange noises coming from the barn. He goes to investigate, and he finds Billy Ray hooting and hollering, doing a slow and sensual striptease in front of an old John Deere. Jeb watches quietly from the door to see Billy Ray pushing away his suspenders, tearing off his shirt to reveal his manly chest. Then he swivels his hips and removes his belt. Finally, Billy Ray drops his drawers and taunts the old machine with what God gave him. "What on earth are you doing, Billy Ray?" Jeb calls out. "Jesus, Jeb Jr., proud to live Jesus out of me," says an obviously embarrassed Billy Ray, quickly pulling on his clothes. "What was you doing?" Jeb asks again. "Well, if you must know, me and the missus been having some trouble lately in the bedroom department, and we went to see a therapist. Darn fool suggested I do something sexy to attract her." Thanks again to First Close for sponsoring this week's podcast. Provides fintech solutions to HELOC and mortgage lenders nationwide, increases profitability, and reduces costs for mortgage lenders through systems and relationships that enable lenders to assist borrowers more effectively and ultimately shorten closing times. To learn more, visit firstclose.ai.